Hello again. I am excited to share this PowerPoint with you about the science behind climate change. As you know, I am Amber Stilwell. I'm the laboratory manager at the Regional Science Consortium. I am also the secretary of something called CRANE, and that stands for Community Resilience Action Network of Erie. Let's start off by talking about the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is what keeps our planet warm. You can almost think of it as if there was a layer of atmosphere acting as a blanket that traps the rays from the sun that bounce back from the earth inside that blanket. That blanket holds the planet's warmth between outer space and the earth to keep us nice and warm. The problem that this creates is when you start adding layers to that blanket, then some of those rays stop escaping. This is what creates the greenhouse effect that's causing climate change, where the Earth as a whole is getting warmer because we're adding layers to that blanket. It's important to remember that we have a living atmosphere that's made up of so many different types of molecules and chemicals, including oxygen, but also things like nitrogen, hydrogen, and water. As you start adding all of these chemicals together, they create the atmosphere that we need to breathe. But if you start adding things in excess, like CO2 or carbon dioxide, then you start getting something called a positive feedback cycle that leads to global warming. What this means is, as you add CO2 to the atmosphere, temperatures start to rise because that blanket that we talked about in the previous slide is getting thicker and thicker. As that blanket gets thicker and the temperature of the planet begins to rise, atmospheric water vapor begins to accumulate in the atmosphere. And what that means is that as the temperature of water gets warmer, it evaporates quicker and more frequently. So you have an increased amount of water vapor added to the atmosphere. Water vapor is actually a greenhouse gas that holds more temperature or more warmth than any other greenhouse gas. So you have a doubling effect that occurs as you add more atmospheric water vapor. The temperature of the planet goes up even more. And then you have issues with decomposition occurring because in a more humid atmosphere that's warmer, decomposition of everything on the planet that is being returned back to its natural carbon state, including leaves and trees and other animals that are that have passed away and are out in the environment. All of these things begin to decompose, and that decomposition process releases even more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So you have this positive feedback cycle where more carbon dioxide leads to more carbon dioxide, and so on and so forth. That is why CO2 is considered the key to global warming. A lot of people ask, how do you know for sure CO2 is causing the temperature of the Earth to rise? How do you know it's causing climate change? And the evidence that we have to show that comes from ice core data from glaciers. We can take ice cores miles and miles down into glaciers. As glaciers are formed, they're formed layer by layer on top of each other. Every time a layer is formed, tiny amounts of air are trapped in between those layers. We can take those ice cores back to a lab and test those teeny tiny air bubbles for CO2 accumulation. So we know what the CO2 of the atmosphere was thousands of years ago. And when we compare the rise in CO2 that we're finding in these ice cores to the rise in global temperature, they are completely related. You see the rises and falls on the graph before you, especially the top graph. You can see the global temperature in orange that is going up, leveling off, and then going up again and leveling off again. And then you can compare that to the CO2 concentration in yellow that is also going up, leveling off, and going up again. So as these things rise and fall together, that is what scientists use to statistically analyze the relationship between two things. In this case, it's global temperature and CO2 concentration. So we looked at thousands of years before present, but how do we know that Earth is, as a whole, getting warmer today? Well, if you look at the data before you, you can see data all the way from 1880 to just a little after 2010. And what you're looking at is data from 4 different research stations that are rising and falling together. This is what we consider to be statistically sound results. You don't have the statistics before you in actual percentages with all of the values that scientists use to determine that things are statistically sound, but I thought that might be a little overwhelming. So just take a look at this graph with me and look at the year 1940. 1940s were when we started to have the biggest incline in our CO2. It started in 1920. We rose in CO2 or in temperature concentrations until 1940. We began to level off, and then we continued to rise all the way until 2010s. And that trend continues to today. This shows us a rapid increase in global temperature from 4 different research stations since 1880. This is important because a lot of people think that the Earth is going through just its regular cycles. But what you see here with all of these different peaks and valleys in that data is those global cycles. Every 100 years or so, the Earth gets a little colder and then it gets a little warmer. But what you're looking at here is data from hundreds of years that is continuously on the rise to getting warmer. One of the best indicators of climate change today is sea ice melt. If you look at the picture in the top right, you can see the blue outline of what the Arctic used to look like from 1979 to 2000 on average. The yellow line is not very visible, so let's look at the orange line from 2012. You can see how much that glacier changed and how much it receded. If we then look at the graph in the bottom left, this is a graph from NOAA, and it's the sea ice extent covering the northern hemisphere. So the green line there represents the median value, so the average value from 1990 all the way to 2018. And the red line represents the trend over time from 1979 to 2017. And you can see that from 1979 all the way to 2017, that red line consistently is on the decrease. What this means is that although glaciers and the Arctic and Antarctic caps change a lot over time and are always growing and kind of shrinking, we've seen an overall average shrinking of sea ice in the northern hemisphere because things are getting warmer, and as those glaciers try to grow during their winter seasons, they're not growing enough to make up for the shrinkage that's happening during the summer. Warmer temperatures don't just affect the oceans and sea ice. They also affect all of the animals and plants that live in all of the habitats around the world. What we call this is biodiversity. That is the variety of life in the world or in a particular habitat or ecosystem. If you change that habitat, you change the way that it functions. You change its ability to be productive. You change the entire ecosystem makeup, which changes the food chain. And that also impacts agriculture in the United States and everywhere around the world. I would like to just use one story of the pika. The pika is pictured in the top on the right there. It's an adorable little rodent animal that lives in northern mountain ranges, and it loves rocky habitats that are somewhat warm. So it doesn't generally live in the highest of altitudes, but somewhere in the middle. It enjoys these habitats because that's where it's able to make its home, in these scraggy mountaintop regions that still have a little bit of vegetation. Now, as things get warmer, the vegetation and the habitat for the pika is changing. So it's being forced to move northward or up the mountain. Eventually, it's going to get to the top of the mountain and it won't have anywhere to make its home or its nests any longer. So the pika are already retreating northern up mountains, and it is definitely something that scientists are seeing warmer temperatures have an effect on right now today. Another question I get is, how will climate change affect me? I don't live in the mountains and I get my food from the grocery store. Well, looking at this graphic from the CDC, it starts in the middle with all the different effects of climate change: warmer temperatures, storms, things like that. As it grows outward, what you're noticing are the different types of impacts that all of those things have on the environment around them. So things like traveling vectors, which bring diseases to new countries, warmer temperatures causing more pollen in the air than normal. All of these can have serious health impacts for people with asthma, or if things like malaria travel from the equator up to the poles and down to the pole, then we're going to be exposed to them and we've never had to deal with them before. So we're going to be exposed to a lot of things that we've never been exposed to before, and it could be something that really impacts the human race in a bigger way than most people really think. So a project that the Regional Science Consortium works on is harmful algal bloom monitoring. The reason that I included this in this PowerPoint is because harmful algal blooms will be directly impacted by climate change. So I'm going to take you through the next couple slides and talk to you about what harmful algal blooms are, how they form, and how climate change will impact that formation and frequency. Let's start with what is a harmful algal bloom, or a HAB, an HAB. These are colonies of algae that are growing out of control while they're producing harmful toxins that are dangerous for humans, animals, and livestock. They have major economic impacts, especially in places like Erie, Pennsylvania, that are really thriving off of tourism in the summer months. In humans, they can cause issues like skin irritation, stomach aches, and nerve damage when they're in high concentrations. The impacts to dogs can be much, much worse. They can cause hot spots, which are sort of like skin irritation, localized areas, but they can also cause seizures, comas, and those two things can often lead to the death of the animal. Harmful algal blooms form under very specific circumstances. The water has to be very calm, so we call that having a low turnover rate, a very calm day with no waves, and very little wind. You have to have sunlight. It has to be a bright sunny day that allows the cyanobacteria to come to the surface and photosynthesize. Cyanobacteria is just another word for harmful algal bloom. And you have to have excess nutrients. So nutrients are things like phosphorus and nitrogen that plants need to survive. And because cyanobacteria, or a harmful algal bloom, it feeds off of nitrogen and phosphorus, they will really bloom excessively under these circumstances with excess nutrients. If they have more food in the water, they can grow bigger and stronger and produce more toxins that are harmful to you and me and to our pets. I just wanted to give you a picture of some harmful algal blooms on Presque Isle State Park and a couple areas that are very, very prone to producing harmful algal blooms. So these pictures from left to right are taken at the Marina, Vista 3, Leo's Landing, and on beaches 6 and 7. It's important to know that the harmful algal blooms can present in many, many different ways. You can see in the picture at the Marina, it's very clustered together, forming a very visible scum on the surface, whereas at beaches 6 and 7, it looks more like it is throughout the water column and it's kind of within the waves, but you can't really see it super clearly, like you can in the photos at Vista 3 and Leo's Landing. And it's important to know that the occurrence of harmful algal blooms will be severely exacerbated by climate change. We're already seeing that the increase of harmful algal blooms related to warmer temperatures and warmer weather and warmer humidity in the air is on the rise in Erie, Pennsylvania and at Presque Isle State Park. The main ways that nutrients get into the water for harmful algal blooms to feed on is through precipitation. So precipitation can be rain, snow, sleet, pretty much anything that's coming from the sky. As it rains, anything on the surface of the land or in the water surrounding the land, which we call the watershed, will dump into the local water body. In this case, it's Lake Erie and Presque Isle Bay. So with climate change, what we're going to see in Erie County is an increase in precipitation, and not just normal precipitation that we have on a day-to-day basis, but extreme weather events that are already happening, like extreme snowstorms, heavy rains that pour inches of water in just hours at a time. All of these extreme weather events will drive nutrients into the Lake Erie and Presque Isle Bay watershed system more frequently and at a higher rate. And when you combine these extreme weather events with extreme amount of nutrients and warmer weather, then you're going to have a lot of increased harmful algal blooms popping up and persisting longer into the summer months. And this will have negative impacts on our tourism capabilities in Erie County, as well as to ourselves and our pets when we look at the health care of ourselves and our animals. Thank you so much for listening to my harmful algal bloom and climate change presentation. Again, my name is Amber Stilwell and I work for the Regional Science Consortium. You can get more information on our website at regsciconsort.com, or you can also visit the CRANE website, which is the Community Resilience Action Network of Erie, for more climate change related topics at pacrane.org.